Hey guys, welcome back to the Power Play on WDSR Student Radio. We are Katie, Daisy, and Chris. And coming up in this next segment, we're going to do a little recap on injuries. I know we talked about them briefly last week. Not a whole lot of new news going on, although if you want to look right here in Pittsburgh at our injuries right now, Letang he's still skating with the team. He's obviously not back to game form yet, but he is still skating with the team, and it was just announced over the weekend that they reassigned Bo Bennett to the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins just so that he can play a few games in the minors, kind of get back to game shape so that he is ready to go, hopefully by the playoffs. And they did announce today that he will still be there through Wednesday, and they are hopeful that he will play on Wednesday as well. He played both games over the weekend, and he actually had the assist on, I think it was the game-tying goal that they eventually won on, I believe it was Saturday that they played, Saturday or Sunday. But so he's coming, he looks like he's looking to make a return very soon. Hopefully no more setbacks for him. He seems to have been a little bit injury prone ever since coming up to the big leagues. So definitely be able to keep our eye on him for a little while. And a couple other injuries around the league I know we talked about before. Do you guys have any updates on any of them, or have any opinions on who's still out and with the playoffs ever approaching, as we talked about earlier? And I think Patrick Kane was the one that we really highlighted and talked about last week.
That's who I'm still thinking is, personally for me, the most major injury right now. And what I didn't see last week when we were talking about it, they're basically calling his injury, his lower body injury, a freak accident. That's how their coach described it. But for me, that's the biggest injury, even with the Blackhawks still obviously going to make it into the playoffs. And I don't know. For me, that's still it. There's not too much different going on. Also, Saad has not come back yet either, I don't believe. So for me right now, it's the Blackhawks. With that, they're not struggling, but I feel like they have the most prominent injuries.
Yeah, I agree. So Patrick Kane's obviously a big out for Chicago. I feel like they have the depth to maybe not replace him, but to play without him for a while. I thought Bennett's reassignment to sort of Wilkes-Barre was appropriate. You want him to get some experience. If there's any if he's a bit light as far as wrist doesn't feel 100% left, you want to get some more feeling back in that as far as game shots and playing a full 20 to 25 minutes, and then bring him back later. But I feel like Dallas might actually miss Rich Pevley a bit. I know they're not in the contention as much as Chicago or Pittsburgh are, but Rich Pevley was playing well for that team. It always hurts to have a player out for the rest of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of want to return to Patrick Kane for a second. I know we mentioned earlier that Boston has a matchup against Chicago. So how do you think, looking in the very immediate future, how do you think that matchup is going to go, and how do you think Chicago will fare without Kane against the red-hot Boston team this week?
That's where it's going to prove interesting. I think that is going to be their real test, especially if Boston continues to be on this streak that they're on. And you're right, they are red hot right now, and I feel like Kane would definitely help aid in that game this week.
Yeah, definitely against that Boston team. Patrick Kane's shown before that he can play extremely well against them. But I feel like Chicago still matches up very well against Boston. They have a lot of speed, and they have strong defense. I feel like it's going to be an interesting game. A lot of teams have pushed Boston in this 12-game winning streak, but Boston's just come back. They played a fuller 60 minutes than the other team has. But I feel like it's going to be interesting because you have a month and a half left of the playoffs, and both teams could possibly play each other again. And I know you're not going to change tactics between now and the Stanley Cup Finals if they were to meet. It's going to be interesting to see what teams have learned from each other from playing each other previously this year, and if they'll do anything different as far as maybe they might rest a few players if a couple of them are feeling a bit injured. But you're not going to rest players for this game. So I feel like it's going to be like a Stanley Cup Final this game. It's going to be two great teams playing each other for two vital points.
It really has the caliber to be like a Stanley Cup Final game. I'm really excited for it this week, and I think it's going to be really interesting. But definitely with Kane and Saad as well, it's going to be a factor for the Blackhawks.
Well, seeing as Kane and Sod are probably not likely to return anytime this week, the Penguins actually have a matchup against the Blackhawks on Sunday. So, how do you think they're going to fare against the Penguins? They've got their injured players out with Kane and Sod out. I think that's going to be another interesting matchup.
That's going to be interesting in the sense that they're all injured in a sense. Like, they might honestly at this point be evenly stacked with all of their injuries. Like, it'll be an interesting game there as well, but for different reasons.
I feel like Pittsburgh's playing sort of better hockey right now. Sort of Chicago's playing well, and I feel like sort of Pittsburgh, if they get that power play working against Chicago, I feel like they can play well. They've got solid goaltending right now behind Fleury, and I feel like right now that points are more vital for Pittsburgh, also more vital for Chicago, because that Western Conference is just packed at the top. As far as I think, there's about 4 or 5 teams within 6 points of each other, and that's for the President's Trophy right there. That's not just for a playoff berth. They're playing for President's Trophy positions there.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like if any team's got more on the line, it's probably going to be Chicago.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about that is since you have a Western League team and an Eastern League team, they're both playing for completely different reasons. So there's going to be a lot of desperation, I think, not to the point where it's really going to affect their true style of play. But, other than that, Sunday's game is definitely going to be one that I think a lot of people are going to want to watch. That and Chicago and Boston. So it's looking like a good week for hockey now. I know last week was a little bit of a lull, but obviously picking up again. So should prove to be an interesting week for sure.
Can we switch gears and talk about the one subject that I was really excited to bring up tonight, and that is the New York Rangers goaltender. My boy Henrik Lundqvist recorded his 50th career shutout in a 2-0 victory over the Devils, and he's now moved to be the franchise's all-time shutout list. Like, he's number 1 now. So I don't know, I'm excited. I've always been a Lundqvist fan. Like, King Henrik, his 9th NHL season, all have been with the Rangers. They drafted him 205th overall in 2000. He's 32, and he's a red-hot goalie.
Yeah, there's a reason why they call him the King. He's a very, very talented goaltender, and New York has been very lucky to have him for his entire career. So and that's definitely not an honor that should be overlooked. I mean, that's huge. 50 shutouts. It doesn't really sound like a whole lot, but when you look at the level of play in this league, and also at the strength of the Rangers too, they're a very solid team as well. And they've had their ups and downs as far as, seasons and everything, and they've been cup contenders before. And for him to be able to accomplish something like that, that's a very, very honorable thing.
Don't get me wrong, I love sort of Henry Lundqvist as much as the next person. And he's a great goaltender, and it's obviously a great accomplishment to become the all-time sort of shutout leader for the club. But I feel like he still has a lot left to prove this season. I know sort of it's a record, but you have to look at the bigger picture here for the New York Rangers, and that's to win the Stanley Cup. They exited early last year, and he wasn't too great in that series against Boston. So I feel like a couple more sort of great playoff performances. Don't get me wrong, he's still one of the best in the league right now, but he still needs to do a bit more for me to sort of rank him up in the sort of top few goaltenders in the last decade.
Do you think this is almost something that's going to be good on him psychologically to maybe give him a little bit more of the push to perform better in a playoff streak?
I feel like an individual record like this for Henry will mean a little bit as far as it's an individual accomplishment, however, and in a sport like hockey, that doesn't really mean a lot. I know a lot of these players are all team-oriented, and to win an individual award does mean something. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure he probably cracked a beer that night or something like that, but I'm sure he would trade that and probably 49 of those shutouts for a Stanley Cup ring.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime you're involved in a sport that's a team sport, you always want to put the team first. But there is a little bit of sense of personal accomplishment and pride that comes with being able to do something like that. And it doesn't matter whether you talk to a professional athlete or an amateur athlete, you're always going to feel some sort of pride from something like that. But yeah, definitely worth noting that he was able to accomplish that, and congratulations to the King. All right, well, we're going to wrap it up here for this segment. We'll be right back after a quick break. And be sure you're following us on Twitter for live updates when that we are at the Power Play 14. And we will be right back after this.